Now let's turn to the Middle East. Now there's been a noticeable shift in public sentiment, and people are starting to turn on Israel. They're blaming Netanyahu for the war raging on and for the suffering in Gaza. Now I say to you this: the prevailing view is not always right. It's manipulated by biased media outlets and distortions on social media. And it's also influenced by repeated messages from the federal government that Israel is deliberately starving Palestinian children and that Israel is to blame. And in this instance, the prevailing wisdom, even from intellectual commentators, is absolutely wrong, because it's clearly Hamas that has refused to accept numerous ceasefire proposals over many months to end the war. It's Hamas that refuses to sit down to new talks. And it's Hamas that will not release the hostages. Doing so would end the war. And the war, from its inception on October 7 until now, does not rage on because of Israel. It's because of Hamas. And this leaves Israel, as I've been saying, in an impossible situation. It can't walk away from the hostages, and nor should it. This would not be morally or politically possible. Israel can't withdraw from Gaza while there are still young hostages dying and terrified in dark tunnels controlled by terrorists. Israel will never give up on its hostages, and no one should ask it to. It would be like leaving innocent people behind in concentration camps. Unimaginable and unforgivable. Yet this is exactly what Penny Wong is now suggesting. The Australian reports today that Labor is urging Israel to end the war in Gaza before the remaining hostages held by Hamas are returned, in a significant move away from its previous calls for the release of the Israelis to be the priority before a deal was struck to end the conflict and recognise Palestine. And here was Penny Wong repeating that position in an interview.
The government's view is the same as the 600 former Israeli security officials who have written publicly urging Prime Minister Netanyahu to end the war and making the very important point that the end of the war is the only way to save the hostages.
The end of the war is the only way to save the hostages? Pull out of Gaza and then hope that Hamas just decides to return them? This is a fantasy. Now, Alex Rifchin, who will be on my show a bit later, he called out Penny Wong on this today, saying that Israel has a moral obligation to do everything it can, diplomatically and militarily, to bring home its starved and tortured citizens. He said Penny Wong should publicly acknowledge that Hamas had stymied attempts to negotiate a ceasefire since May. He said, and I quote, "Israel accepted the internationally brokered ceasefire that would have seen the unfettered flow of aid, the phased return of hostages, and a pathway to a permanent end to the war. It is unsatisfactory for this material fact to be omitted by Wong, giving the false impression that Israel is the barrier to the ceasefire and not Hamas." But it's even worse than misleading or a false impression, because Penny Wong's position actually reduces the chance of the hostages being released, and it reduces the chance of a ceasefire deal that would end the war. Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Saar explained it well. He said that the international community's plans to recognise a Palestinian state sabotaged a ceasefire deal with the Hamas terror group.
There are countries that acted also in this building to pressure Israel instead of Hamas during sensitive days in the negotiations by attacking Israel, campaigning against Israel, and their announcement on a recognition of the virtual Palestinian state. They gave Hamas free gifts and an incentive to continue this war. They directly assassinated the hostage deal and ceasefire. Let me be clear, these countries prolonged the war.
It's ironic, isn't it, that the likes of Penny Wong and Keir Starmer, Macron and others have sabotaged the chance of Hamas agreeing to a ceasefire deal, which would end Palestinian suffering and return the hostages. And here was Greg Sheridan earlier speaking to Steve Price. He pointed out how these international leaders are rewarding terrorism.
It's a great reward for Hamas. Hamas can look at every moderate in the Palestinian territory and say, look what you got. You got nothing. We went and killed 1,200 Jews, and look, the world has rewarded us with formal recognition of a Palestinian state. That's what the Albanese government is signing up for in this instance.
This is how incompetent and stupid these left-wing international leaders are. And they're also increasing anti-Semitism, which is dangerous here in Australia. And this is how they're doing it. Because Wong and Albanese are giving Australians the false impression that Israel is the barrier to peace and not Hamas. And that's why some unthinking Australians marched over the Harbour Bridge. They are ill-informed, uneducated, and swallowed the Hamas propaganda they were fed by our own government. Those protesters should be protesting Hamas to end the war, to agree to the ceasefire proposal, to return the hostages. Only these actions would end the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Now, I know it's not always easy for you at home to stand up to your friends or your colleagues or other parents and grandparents at school pickup and call out the false narrative that's taking hold, but we all must do it because the narrative is simply not accurate and the truth matters. It does. We can't walk away from it. And don't ever forget the words of skeletal hostage Evitar David's brother on this show last night after we saw those confronting and distressing images. Ilay, his brother, last night implored international leaders like Albanese and Wong not to give up on his brother and the other hostages, 50 in total.
If he's still alive, he's not giving up. He knows that he's coming back home eventually. And I believe it's the same for all the hostages. And he didn't give up. And if he's not giving up, we can't give up. We can, the leaders of this world can't.
Now, Netanyahu has begged for the Red Cross to deliver food for those hostages. And of course, they haven't done it. That hasn't happened. Yet Penny Wong now suggests Israel walk away from Eviatar. That would mean letting him starve, letting him die, only to be buried in the grave he dug himself. We can't let that happen. Let Ilay's powerful words, not to give up on his brother, ring in the morally corrupt ears of Wong and Albanese.